The nurse leaned in gently. "Still no one called back, Ruth?" I shook my head, clutching my discharge papers like they were proof I still mattered. 3 days alone in recovery, and not a single visit. My daughter's last text read, "Busy. Maybe Uber?" So a stranger wheeled me out. I opened my front door to silence and stale air. But it was the empty driveway that broke me. That night, I stared at the house I built for them and whispered, "They don't deserve this place." Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time I had a name that echoed in hallways. Mrs. Calloway, front office, or Ruth. Can you help with the copier? I spent 31 years as a school secretary, wearing sensible shoes and a polite smile, holding up the bones of that place like the steel under a bridge. I memorized every teacher's coffee order. I knew which kid's mother cried during conferences. I showed up early, stayed late, and left quietly when I retired, with a small sheet cake and a gift card to Olive Garden. But none of that ever bothered me, because I had a purpose. I raised 3 children on my own after Charles passed. Heart attack at 49. He'd gone out to the garage for a hammer and never came back. I found him on the floor, one hand still reaching for the toolbox. The silence after the sirens left never really ended. But I didn't fall apart. I had mouths to feed and shoes to buy and math homework to fake my way through. I worked mornings at the school and cleaned offices at night. I didn't complain. I thanked God for breath and a broom. The house on Elmwood was our kingdom. It was nothing grand, but every inch of it held fingerprints. I painted the kids' bedrooms sky blue and sunflower yellow. I hand-sewed curtains. Every winter, I'd tape plastic over the windows to keep the draft out. In the summer, I'd mow the lawn myself and plant roses near the mailbox. I always said, "One day, this will be yours." That promise was the spine of every sacrifice. I helped Samantha through grad school, even when she moved cross-country and barely called. I co-signed a loan for Jacob when he wanted to start his business. I watched Leo's kids every Saturday so he and his wife could have date nights. And I was happy to do it. Really. I told myself that's what mothers do, even when the phone calls slowed, even when holidays were just text messages with digital balloons, even when I celebrated my birthday alone for the 3rd year in a row with a cupcake and 1 flickering candle. I made excuses. They're busy. They're building their lives. This is the season for that. But the truth? The silence started to feel like abandonment. The silence began to ache like a bruise. I kept the house like a museum, spotless, full of memories no one asked about. I'd make coffee for 2 out of habit. I kept a tin of cookies in the pantry just in case someone dropped by. They never did. Last Thanksgiving, I cooked everything from scratch, just in case: turkey, green bean casserole, cornbread, pumpkin pie. I set the table for 6, like I always had. I even used the good cloth napkins. I waited until the food went cold, not a single knock on the door. Not a single call. Later, I found out they'd had Thanksgiving together. Samantha posted pictures on Facebook. They were all there, smiling, holding champagne flutes. The caption read, "Grateful for family time." I stared at that screen until the battery died. I think something inside me shifted then. A quiet click. Not rage, not grief, something heavier. A realization. I wasn't family anymore. I was just a footnote in their group texts. And yet, despite everything, I still clung to that house. Because it was proof. Proof that I had mattered. That I'd done something. That I'd given everything I had to give. But after that Thanksgiving, the rooms felt too loud with their absence. I started to notice how the floorboards creaked when I walked alone. How the porch light stayed on for no one. How my voice, saying hello in an empty hallway, didn't sound like mine anymore. And still, I waited. I waited for one of them to remember me. I waited, right up until the day my knees buckled in the frozen food aisle. I had always believed I was the anchor of our family. But as I lay in that hospital bed, alone and waiting, I realized I was just dead weight they'd quietly cut loose. I don't remember the fall. One moment I was reaching for frozen peas. The next, a soft fluorescent blur and a stranger's voice saying, "Ma'am, ma'am, can you hear me?" They said it was pneumonia, advanced. My oxygen levels had dropped. I had been walking around with fluid in my lungs for nearly 2 weeks. The paramedics asked if there was someone they could call. I gave them Samantha's number first, then Jacob's, then Leo's. I remember the way the nurse squinted at the phone screen. "I left voicemails," she said gently. "Maybe they'll call back soon." No one did. The hospital room smelled like bleach and lemon. The air conditioner rattled softly. I was in a shared room, curtain drawn halfway. On the other side, an older woman named Janice chatted with her son every afternoon at 3 p.m. He brought her a crossword puzzle book, fuzzy socks, and fresh-cut flowers. They laughed. He even kissed her forehead. I would stare at the ceiling, quietly counting the ceiling tiles. 87. I counted them every day. When nurses came in, I smiled too much, tried to seem okay. They brought me extra pudding. One of them found a small plant and left it by my window. "I'm sorry no one's come yet," she whispered, not unkindly. I told her it was fine. They're probably just busy. But it wasn't fine. The hours dragged like molasses. The beeping of machines became my company. Once, a nurse left a card on my tray. It wasn't signed, just said, "You matter more than you think." By the 4th day, I stopped checking my phone. Not because the battery died, but because hope did. And then, as quietly as I had come in, they discharged me. No family escort, no goodbye flowers. Just a paper bag with antibiotics, a hospital bill estimate, and a nurse with soft eyes saying, "You sure you have someone to take you home?" I said yes. I lied. They called me a medical transport van, but it was delayed, so one of the younger nurses, Marcus, offered to drive me himself. His shift was ending anyway. The car ride was silent. He played soft jazz on the radio. I stared out the window, at the gray sky, and wondered if they even knew I was gone. When we pulled into my driveway, I whispered, "Thank you." He just nodded, helped me to the door, and waited until I got inside. The house was exactly as I left it, too tidy, too quiet. The stack of junk mail by the door had grown. The answering machine blinked once. A robocall. I sat on the edge of the couch, jacket still on, purse still slung across my body. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared at the framed family photos on the mantel. Christmas, 2004. Samantha's college graduation. Jacob in his football uniform. Leo's wedding. So many frozen smiles, so much pretend permanence. And I realized something sharp and undeniable. Not one of them had been inside this house in almost 2 years. I stood up, walked from room to room like I was seeing it for the first time. The rose-patterned china in the cabinet, untouched since Easter 2016. The couch I'd reupholstered by hand just before Charles died. The throw blanket Leo left behind when his wife was pregnant with their first. I touched everything, like it might vanish if I blinked. Then I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and laughed, an actual laugh. There were still Thanksgiving leftovers in Tupperware, mold creeping up the corners. That's when the loneliness tipped into something else. Not anger, not yet. But a clean, quiet grief. I picked up my phone, opened our family group chat, and typed, "I'm home now. It's okay if no one can visit. I understand." No one replied, and that silence gave me the answer I didn't want, but needed. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I said it was just to update my will, a routine thing. But what I really wanted to know, what I had to know, was this. Did the house still belong to me and me alone? He asked for the deed. I sent over a scan. When he called back the next day, his voice was clear, certain. You're the sole owner, Ruth. Has been that way for years. I didn't say much, just nodded even though he couldn't see. When I hung up, I stood at the front window and looked at the mailbox. The red flag was up. A package, maybe? Or another bill? But all I could think was, they never came back. And maybe I shouldn't either. I had gone into the hospital thinking I might die. But walking back into that empty house, I realized I already had. Just not in the way they'd notice. 2 weeks after I got home from the hospital, Samantha finally texted, "Hey, glad you're feeling better. Can you help me out with something?" No mention of my hospital stay. No, how are you? No, I'm sorry. She needed money. Again. Something about a resort in Maui and a non-refundable deposit. I stared at the message, blinking back the sting in my eyes. I wasn't surprised, just tired. I typed out a reply. Wish I could, still paying off my hospital bill. I deleted it, left her on read. An hour later, Jacob called. I took a deep breath before answering, hoping maybe, just maybe, he'd noticed my silence. He needed me to watch the kids for a weekend. His wife had booked a couple's retreat. I told him I didn't feel well. He sighed, audibly. You always say that now. As if grief had an expiration date. As if aging and solitude were a performance I was putting on to inconvenience them. I hung up mid-sentence. I'd never done that before. I sat in the recliner afterward, shaking, not from guilt, but from unfamiliar resolve. That night, I sat with a cup of lukewarm tea, scrolling through our old family group thread. The last message I sent, the one after the hospital, still sat unanswered. Above it, photos of Samantha's second honeymoon planning, Leo's new grill, Jacob's new puppy. I wasn't in any of their pictures. I hadn't been for a long time. I closed my eyes and remembered the last time all three of them had been under one roof. Christmas 2019. They had come late, left early, and spent most of the evening glued to their phones. Samantha brought store-bought cookies in a plastic tray. Leo asked if we could speed through gift-giving because his kids had another stop to make. Jacob argued with his wife in the hallway. After they left, I picked up half-wrapped gifts, wiped ketchup off the good linens, and cried into the scent of pine and orange peels. I thought, maybe next year will be different, but next year turned into COVID, then too busy, then just silence. Now, years later, I could feel the weight of all those holidays pressing down on my chest. My phone buzzed again. A message from Leo this time. "Hey, just found out you sold Dad's old toolbox." On Facebook? That wasn't yours to give away? I hadn't. But someone had messaged me about it after seeing an old garage photo I posted. That's when I realized they were still watching my posts, still monitoring, but only when it suited them. I didn't reply. I deleted the app. The next day, a thick yellow envelope arrived. Medical bills, nearly $7,000. Insurance had denied a portion of the ER visit. The pages flapped in my hand like punishment. I sat at the kitchen table, looked out at the fading roses in the front yard, and for the first time, I felt angry, not loud, fist-banging anger, just a quiet, cold knowing, the kind that seeps in your bones. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had used me. For years. I had funded their beginnings, babysat their children, forgiven their silence, and in return, I was now an afterthought. A woman in a house they only remembered when they needed something. I opened the junk drawer and pulled out a dusty legal folder labeled House. I flipped through it slowly. Deed, insurance, receipts for every roof repair, pipe replacement, furnace. Update, all mine, every cent paid by me. Suddenly, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a monument to my mistakes, to all the times I said yes when I should have said enough. I picked up the phone. Called my friend Judy, a retired notary who still played bridge with a local realtor. Do you know someone discreet? I asked. Her pause was brief. You want to sell? Yes, I said, quietly. I met the realtor, Ellie, 2 days later. A kind woman, early 40s, who wore cardigans and looked me in the eye when I spoke. She didn't flinch when I said, I don't want my children involved. She just nodded. You have every right. We walked the property together. I expected her to pick it apart. Instead, she said, This house has soul. I nearly cried. When she left, I sat on the front porch with a glass of lemonade listening to the wind rustle the trees, and I whispered, I think I'm ready, not just to sell, to let go, to be more than the ghost they left behind. When Ellie called with the first offer, I didn't hesitate. I simply said, yes. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't giving something away. I was taking something back. Edders. Not to my children, to myself. One for every year I'd spent waiting. One for every time I forgave silence. One for every apology I never received but still deserved. I folded each letter and put them in a small box, labeled it, Read only when you forget who you are. I packed it last, right after the bracelet box. Have you ever been left out like that? By the people you loved the most? What did you do? Tell me below. I'm still learning how to let go. That night, I stood at the window, watching the porch light glow over an empty driveway, and I smiled. Not because someone was coming, but because I no longer needed them to. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive with a trumpet. It comes in quietly, through a half-open window or a gentle breeze that smells like lavender and clean beginnings. I move through the house with purpose now, not like a ghost. Every box I taped shut was a silent declaration. I'm choosing myself. Now, Ellie handled everything with grace. I found a buyer, she said one afternoon, standing in my kitchen holding a crisp manila folder. Young couple. Just married. Expecting their first baby. They'd loved the rose bushes, she said. I ran my fingers along the kitchen counter as she spoke, remembering my children's fingers, once sticky with frosting and mischief. But this time, I didn't ache. Instead, I whispered, let them make new memories here. We signed the closing papers at a diner off Route 8. Booth seat, black coffee, no ceremony. I held the pen steady. I didn't cry. As I passed the last document across the table, Ellie looked at me, her eyes soft. You okay? She asked. I smiled, just a little. I think I might be. She placed her hand over mine, and for a long moment, we just sat in the quiet. The next morning, I moved into my new home. The cottage was smaller, yes, but every room breathed. The walls were whitewashed and bare, waiting for fresh memories. The windows opened easily, and the sunlight poured in like a blessing. I unpacked the bracelet box first, then the letters. Then a chipped ceramic mug that said, Best Mom, the last thing Leo had given me back in 2009. I placed it on the windowsill. Not because I believed it, but because I wanted to believe I could still be whole, even with the cracks. That evening, I lit a candle in the kitchen. Lemon and sage, my favorite. I brewed myself a cup of tea and sat at the little table by the window. No noise, no demands, no guilt, just me. And it was enough. I woke up early the next morning and opened every window in the house. The wind moved through like a song. I spent the day planting a small herb garden outside. Basil, thyme, mint. My hands covered in earth, sweat collecting at my temples. I hadn't worked like that in years. Neighbors passed and waved. A woman across the street named Helen walked over with a plate of muffins and an offer to join the Sunday morning quilting group. I accepted. By the end of the week, I had learned all their names. They called me Miss Ruth and invited me to potlucks. I hadn't been called Miss anything in years. It felt like being noticed again, like being seen. One afternoon, I sat on my new porch and reread the letters I wrote to myself. They were short, honest, fierce in quiet ways. You are not a burden. You are not too much. You are not invisible. You do not owe anyone your silence. That last one. I read it out loud. Then I tore it in half and let the pieces fly into the breeze. I didn't need that reminder anymore. The finality of the sale settled in slowly. There were no calls. No one asked why the house was gone, and I didn't offer the answer. Let them wonder. Let them feel the echo. Because for once, the silence belonged to me. That weekend, I drove past the old house one last time. The new owners had painted the front door a cheerful yellow. A child's drawing fluttered in the window. I didn't stop. I didn't knock. I didn't even slow down. I just smiled and whispered, "Be better to her than they were to me." Then I turned the corner and never looked back. That night I stood barefoot in my new kitchen, sipping tea by candlelight, and said to the quiet, "Welcome home, my love." And for the first time, I meant it. 3 weeks after the sale, the storm came, not outside, inside the screen. It began with a voicemail from Samantha. Breathless, sharp, the kind of voice that came from panic, not love. "Mom? What's going on? Why is the house listing offline? Did you rent it? Please call me back. This isn't funny." I didn't respond. I made myself a sandwich. Washed the dishes. Later that evening, I took a walk around the neighborhood while the sun dipped behind the pine trees. By the time I returned, I had 4 missed calls. 2 from Samantha, 1 from Jacob, 1 from Leo. The next morning, Jacob's voice came through. The phone before I even said hello. "Why didn't you tell us you were selling the house?" His tone was less concern, more accusation. "Because I didn't need your permission," I said calmly. Silence. Then, "That house was Dad's. Ours." "You can't just—" "I was the sole owner, Jacob." My voice didn't shake. "I paid the taxes. I repaired the roof. I took out the loan when your father died. I held that house up with my hands while you were children." He sputtered, then hung up. Not even 2 hours later, I got an email from a lawyer. A formal-sounding man representing my son. Property dispute inquiry regarding joint inheritance claims. I stared at the screen, then laughed. There it was, not grief, not concern, just the fear that they wouldn't get their cut. Forwarded the email to my own lawyer. He replied with one sentence, "You are fully protected. They have no legal claim." That night, I received a text from Samantha. No greeting, no apology. "So this is how it ends? You cut us out completely?" I stared at the blinking cursor for a full minute, then typed, "You were never inside to be cut out from anything," and pressed send. They didn't respond for days. The silence was sharp this time, deliberate, punishing. But I didn't bend under it like I used to. Instead, I spent my time baking. I brought banana bread to Helen across the street. I joined the Sunday quilting group and stitched a patch that read, "Still here." My world had gotten smaller, but it had never felt more full. Until one night, I heard a car outside. I peeked through the curtain. A dark SUV idled in the street. A figure stepped out. Jacob. He looked thinner, tired. He knocked. Twice. I opened the door just a crack. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped out onto the porch, left the door ajar but didn't invite him in. He looked around the porch, then back at me. "This is where you live now?" "Yes." He cleared his throat. "Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped." I tilted my head. "Like you helped when I was in the hospital?" His mouth opened, then shut. He looked down at his shoes. I waited. Not out of hope, but out of curiosity. He said, "We were busy. Life's just messy," I finished for him. "Yes, I know." He looked up. "So what now? Are we just strangers? I didn't raise my voice, didn't cry. I'm not angry, Jacob. I'm just finished waiting. That's all. I could see it hit him, the quiet weight of it. He nodded once, eyes glassy. I didn't mean to let you down. But you did. A beat of silence passed. He whispered, "Can I come in?" I shook my head. Not tonight. I watched him walk back to the car, shoulders low. The SUV pulled away into the dark, and the moment he disappeared around the corner, I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief, not sadness, something like completion. The next day, I swept the porch, watered my herbs, replied to a card from Helen thanking me for the bread. My phone stayed quiet. No more calls, no more threats, just the soft hum of a life no longer lived for anyone else. As Jacob's car vanished down the road, I stood in the doorway, not waiting, not hoping, just standing. And for once, I didn't feel like someone's mother. I felt like someone's self. It had been a month since Jacob showed up at my door. The rest of the children stayed quiet, retreating into a silence that felt more like strategy than sorrow. I suppose they expected me to come crawling back. To apologize for setting a boundary they had spent years ignoring, but I didn't. I had found something better than their approval. I had found peace. Then, one morning, a letter arrived, not typed, not formal. Just a small envelope with careful handwriting and a forever stamp. Inside was a note from my granddaughter, Lily, Samantha's oldest. "Dear Grandma, Mom told me about the house. She's upset, but I wanted to write you because I get it. I really do. I'm sorry we haven't been around. I never knew you were in the hospital. That wasn't okay. If it's all right, I'd like to come visit sometime. Just me. Love, Lily." I read the letter 3 times. There was no guilt in it, no manipulation, just honesty. So I wrote back, "Dear Lily, I'd love that. Saturdays are quiet here. You're welcome anytime. Just bring yourself and a pair of shoes you don't mind getting dirty. There's work to do in the garden." The following Saturday, she came. Tall now, 19, college-bound, wide-eyed but soft-spoken. She brought lavender cookies and a small potted plant. "I didn't know what to get you," she said, embarrassed. I smiled. "You brought yourself. That's more than enough." We sat on the porch, drank lemonade, and talked like 2 women. Not grandmother and granddaughter, just 2 souls, trying to understand the same grief from different ends. She told me she felt forgotten too, overlooked in her own house, seen only when needed. I nodded. I knew that song. "I used to think love meant giving everything," I said, looking out at the horizon. "But sometimes love means choosing yourself before there's nothing left to give." She reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold, but steady. "I want to come back," she said. "Maybe help in the garden?" I smiled. "There's an apron with your name on it." Every week after that, Lily came. We planted zinnias and snapdragons. We painted the fence white and hung wind chimes by the kitchen window. She never once asked about the house, never questioned my choices. She just showed up, and in her presence, something began to heal. I started writing again, little notes to myself, letters I didn't hide this time. I stuck them to the fridge, to the bathroom mirror, to the inside of my kitchen cabinets. Keep growing. Still here. This is not the end of you. One afternoon, while pulling weeds, Lily looked up and asked, "Do you miss them?" It was a fair question. I wiped my brow with the back of my hand and thought for a moment. I miss who I believed they were, but not who they became. She nodded, tears catching in her lashes. "I think I'm scared to become like them." I leaned over, took her hand. "Then don't," I said. "Break the pattern. Stay soft. Stay present. That's how we start over." We sat like that for a while. 2 generations, Dirt under our nails, silence between us, easy, peaceful. That night, she left me a note on the kitchen counter. "Thank you for letting me see you, and for letting me be seen." I cried over that one, not from pain, from relief, because even if I had lost 3 children, I had found one, and maybe that was enough. The next week I hosted my first proper dinner in the cottage. Just Lily and Ellie, the realtor who had quietly become a friend. We ate spaghetti and garlic bread, drank sparkling cider, and lit a candle just because. Lily offered a toast. "To second chances," she said, and we clinked glasses like it was Christmas, because in a way, it was. I had given up a house filled with memories that hurt, and I had made space for something new, something softer, something chosen. And for the first time in years, I didn't just exist in someone else's story. I was writing my own. The woman who once begged to be remembered now plants her name in the soil, one seed at a time, and this time, something is finally growing back. The holidays came and went that year without a single call from my children. No card, no voicemail, no apology wrapped in a ribbon of guilt. And yet, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting. I didn't bake extra. I didn't check my phone. I didn't count chairs around the table. Because this time, there were only 3, and that was plenty. Lily came over early on Christmas Eve. She wore a scarf she'd knitted herself and carried, a tin of homemade ginger cookies. Ellie arrived just after dusk with a bottle of sparkling pear cider and a second-hand jigsaw puzzle of a snowy cabin. We ate slow, talked softer, laughed with our mouths full. I made stew from scratch and passed. Warm bread in a basket, no distractions, no backhanded comments, just 3 women at a candlelit table, giving thanks without saying it out loud. When we finished, I raised my glass. "To new roots," I said. "To soft endings." They clinked their glasses to mine, and it echoed like bells across the quiet room. A few weeks later, I received a manila envelope in the mail. Inside were court papers. My son had officially dropped his inheritance claim. The lawyer's note was short. "No further action will be pursued. Client considers the matter closed. No apology, no admission of guilt, just a folded end." And I welcomed it, not because it made things right, but because it allowed me to close a door without slamming it. Lily continued to visit. She brought friends once, all around her age. They helped paint the garden fence and cleared out the back shed. One of them looked at me and said, "Your place is magic." I smiled, not because I believed her, but because I finally believed I'd built something worth being proud of. I even had the courage to walk into a local art store and buy a blank journal. I titled it, "Things I Never Got to Say." The first entry wasn't bitter. It simply read, "You should have loved me better, but I loved myself enough to leave." By spring, the cottage had become a small rhythm I didn't realize I craved. Wake early, water the herbs. Brew coffee in the ceramic blue pot Lily gave me. The woman I used to be, the one who stayed up worrying if her children had eaten, who ironed napkins for people who never came, she still visits me sometimes. She's quieter now, but I don't hate her. She just didn't know better. And when she whispers, "You could have fought harder," I answer gently, "I did. You just didn't see the moment I stopped fighting for them and started fighting for me." One rainy afternoon, I found the bracelet again, still tucked in its box, still shining. I slipped it on, and this time, I didn't feel foolish. I felt whole. I stood at the window as the rain tapped the pane like old music. Outside, the garden was blooming, wild, unruly, unapologetically alive, and I thought, maybe that's what I am now, too. Not polished, not perfect, but rooted. Would you have sold the house too, or held on? What would you have done in my shoes? I'm listening, and I'm ready for your story too. That spring, when the cherry tree blossomed beside my porch, I didn't wish for anyone to see it but me. And for once, my joy didn't need an audience to be real. Sometimes I walk out into the garden barefoot just to feel the soil between my toes. The old me would have never done that. Too messy, too childish. But now I think there's something sacred about letting the earth remind you you're still alive. The roses are blooming again. Not the ones I used to plant by the mailbox, back at the big house. These are wild, tangled, imperfect. The petals are uneven, and the thorns are sharp. But they grow anyway. Like me, I think about that house less and less now. When I do, it's not with pain, it's with distance, like remembering a dream that no longer fits your waking life. I don't blame my children anymore. I don't forgive them either. I simply let them go. Because the truth is, I gave them everything I had to give. I bent myself into silence. I dressed my loneliness in politeness and kept the lights on just in case they remembered. But they didn't. And I finally stopped punishing myself for their absence. The woman I am now, she doesn't beg, she doesn't chase. She waters her own garden, drinks her coffee hot, and tells the truth, even when no one's around to hear it. I see her sometimes in the mirror. She's older than I remember, softer in some places, stronger in others. She smiles more often now, not for anyone else, but because she wants to, and that might be the real victory, not the sale of the house. Not the silent goodbye, but the simple act of becoming someone I want to live with. Lily still visits. We sit on the porch and read aloud to each other, sometimes poetry, sometimes just the quiet. She tells me about school, about the boy she likes. Sometimes she asks hard questions about family, about love, about loss. I don't always have the answers, but I tell her what I know. You are allowed to leave what hurts, even if it once gave you life. You are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to be more than who they say you are. She listens. She always listens. There's a small wooden box on my dresser now. Inside are all the letters I wrote to myself during that season of unraveling. I keep them not as proof of pain, but as evidence of survival, of growth, of the quiet kind of courage it takes to say, no more. I don't know if my children ever talk about me. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm the villain in a story they tell themselves to sleep at night. That's fine. Let them have their story. I have mine. If you're still here, still listening, still carrying your own ache in silence, let me say this to you. You don't have to earn your worth by suffering. You don't have to stay in places where love feels like debt. You are allowed to set down the weight. You are allowed to come home, to yourself, because I did. And I promise you, it's not too late. Now, when I set the table, I only place one bowl. And I fill it with care. And I eat slowly, and I light a candle anyway. Not because someone's coming, but because I am already here. I gave them everything, and it wasn't enough. Then I gave myself just one thing, freedom. And it was everything.